Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy. Returning to my Sacred Sites Tarot project of learning about each of these sites by watching YouTube documentaries, or sometimes it's travelogues that help me understand why these sites are selected. Some of them I know, but hey, this is an opportunity to learn more about them. All right, so the first one is the Hermit card. So we're going to do the Hermit today. I already did the Wheel of Fortune in a different video, so I'll try to either put that in the end screen or link it below. So today we're doing the Hermit card, which is Petra in Jordan, the Justice card, which is the Summer Palace, the Hanged Man, which is Christ the Redeemer in Rio, that's the statue in Rio de Janeiro, the Death card, which is the old Jewish cemetery in Prague, and Temperance, which is Ganges. So we're starting with Petra. And this is the classic awe-inspiring view here that most people are familiar with. Certainly I was familiar with it. But I didn't realize a lot of things about Petra. That there was a larger city and temple complex and additional caves and how long it had been in use. That it, in many ways, like a lot of these sites, is a city of the dead. And so one of the things that I will probably continue to repeat throughout this, if the theme keeps being so dominant, is, the strength of ancestor worship and or our desire as a species to stay connected to the past and to those who have passed, So interesting. And I hadn't thought of this as a deck that would do any of any healing to do with my problem with death, but it might end up being that. So we'll just see. Certainly it just has a lot to do with, as I've said, I think in the previous video, water, which is the giver of life, and death, or staying connected to others after they have died. So let me just read through what there is in the guidebook, which doesn't have much, but it has a sentence or so. We'll use that as a jumping off point for my few notes that I have here about Petra. All right. Abandoned by its inhabitants around the 8th century, it was long forgotten and never rediscovered until modern times. Of course, the Bedouins knew it was there, but the rest of us didn't. So there's always kind of a problem with the great discovery. Well, by whom? But so that really doesn't tell us anything, does it? Why it would be in a sacred sites. I will also say another thing that I am learning as I go through this process with these cards is a lot of these awe-inspiring monuments are a result of one person's enormous ego. There is so much ego. So who would necessarily want to not have these monuments, to not have, and I think that this is not so much that, but, oh, no, I can't remember. What is the name of the one that's is it in Laos or Myanmar? The Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat. You know, who would not want to have those? Or the, you know, the temples down in the Yucatan and in Central America, and you know, the tombs of the pharaohs are just so awe-inspiring. Um, but at the same time, they're the product of some people with men, generally. I don't know that I've come up with a woman yet, with enormous egos that feel that it's appropriate to, you know, bring everybody together, pay them, enslave them, whatever, to raise a monument to them, you know? Um, yeah, so there is that aspect of it. And what I would love, I'm rambling here a little bit, I'll get back to the cards. What I would love, and I think that's part of the attraction of the Majestic Earth Tarot, although it also has some cities and things of that nature in there. But I would love a deck that was more just places in nature as opposed to things that people have built. And I believe there's some of that. I am sure that there's some of that in here. They are just places like Mount Kailash, which I have already talked about. Even the Ganges. You know, this deck has both the Ganges and a city, Varanasi, on the Ganges. So anyway, but here we are with this, and it's a really interesting. It is its own journey. You know, I also talked about what I'm learning about pilgrimages and the importance of sacred journeys, and it's interesting how that is being kind of co-opted by tourism. I don't know if co-opted is quite the right word, but certainly there are people who are engaging in these pilgrimages as a recreational activity without the spiritual without any spiritual intention in it. I don't think I have any. I don't think there's any today that have to do with pilgrimages, though. So I will shut up. I will stop rambling and get back to Petra. So one of another thing that I had zero idea, zero knowledge of, is that Petra, I think there were two goddesses that were worshipped. So they were, whoever built it was there's a name for them that I'm not going to remember. Nabadians, maybe, something like that. They were a goddess worshipping culture. So yes, goddess worship here. And even more interesting that they didn't tend to depict their deities as in human form, so much as a symbol like a square or a triangle or something like that. So they kept it more abstract. Anyway, do I have anything else on Petra? Cats, those who are cat lovers, there were cats on the capitals. There's a temple of winged lions. Goddess worship. Oh, and this is another one that is, you know, a city in the desert that, and this is like, which one was it? Well, I can't. This is my mind. This is my memory. the place in Palestine, the Jericho. Jericho. You know, that it essentially, the persistence of Jericho and the culture there over many years had to do with a spring, and this has to do with water also. And that they had a really fascinating way that they managed their water to make this work. So if anybody is aware, this looks, and this thing that they walk through looks like a gigantic slot canyon, you know, formed by water. And there is a theory these days that, well, and this supposedly was not formed by water. It's a seam in the earth, and so there was an earthquake, and these two things separated. But it creates a slot canyon, and there are slot canyons in other places, and a slot canyon being a place where rainwater, when it does rain, gets channeled en masse through a very narrow opening and kind of sweeps everything out of its path when it comes through. And so it's believed now that the end of Petra occurred as a result of some sort of flood that their system was not equipped to handle. Their yeah, they had a way of redirecting the water should there be a flood, and of course collecting the water when they do need to for just everyday living. So anyway, the Hermit. So the Hermit, clearly because it's sequestered, it's hidden away. Next, this one was really difficult to figure out why the heck it was in this position. And I thought, well, maybe it's just the fact that there are lions, you know, but that isn't that isn't enough for me, really. But I did discover, and I had to go to forget about videos and go to good old Wikipedia, and there's a hall which the name has been changed, but was formerly recalled the Hall of Good Governance, and there is an administrative building in this summer palace. So the summer palace is actually a big garden. It's a big garden. You know, it was used in part for recreation. There's this empress, I think it was, I don't know if she was an empress dowager or, at any rate, in the later part of her life, she inhabited this garden and this complex, but it had also been used for administrative purposes. And anything else I had? No, nothing else in the summer place. So this I had to learn quite a bit about and see the garden and see the touristy stuff. And it was only when I went to Wikipedia and found that Hall of Good Governance that it's like, all right, well, that makes some sense. There's also some historical justice that has gone on. This was used, what was it? During this is my memory. There was colonialism, or I don't know if it was outright invasion, but the British Empire entered China, and I think they destroyed this at one time, and it was rebuilt, and I don't know, there was a story around that also that I clearly am not remembering kind of the details of. And so there was a matter of justice from the Chinese back, and I can't remember even what it was. I'm going to have to interrupt this video for just a second. Sorry about that. I am back, and hopefully I made the cut not too rough. So yeah, the summer palace was difficult to kind of make the connection. So I'm going to have to keep that frame, that hall of good governance. And there are many halls, and this one happened to be renamed something else. Something like Harmony and something, which I think was a long Chinese tradition at that point. But otherwise, it's just a really, it's a big garden, a big beautiful place, and so it was, it was just like, all right, how is this a justice card? There doesn't seem to be too much karma associated with it, or justice or judgment of any kind. But there is the hall of good governance, and that does make sense. All right, so on to a break in our series here. So while I was looking at the Summer Palace based in Beijing, China, I was being presented, as YouTube/Google will do, I was being presented with the Forbidden City. And the Forbidden City is also represented in this deck. And it's the Four of Wands. And I can see that, I would have thought it would have been, something, I guess I would say, a little grander than the Four of Wands, like maybe a Ten of Pentacles or something. But no, again, the ego, the whole ego thing is highly active in this particular structure. But the way that it's wands is that it kept burning. I just found that so interesting and appropriate for wands. That does make it more of a tower card, but it was built of wood as opposed to things like Petra or the Greek temples, etc. It was built of wood, and its main edifice inside the walls was the tallest thing around, was the tallest building around. So it kept getting struck by lightning and burning down, and they kept rebuilding it. I don't know if it was 3 times, 4 times. Yeah. It could have also been the Four of Swords, but the wood aspect, the wand aspect, is very much there. I realize I'm not really showing you the cards, so there that is. And now, of course, it's a huge tourist destination, which also makes it Four of Wands at this point. It's no longer the Forbidden City. And I don't know that I can read the Forbidden City in here. A little white book. It says the Imperial Palace of the Ming and Qing dynasties. This place was forbidden to all those who were not a member of the imperial house. But it was much coveted to belong there. So, I suppose you could think of that as being a private party of some kind, but that is not the impression that was given at all. It does not seem to be the way that they lived. something else I was going to look up. But I guess that's it in the book thus far. So again, and some of these will be quick. There's just not too much to say about them that is kind of relevant to the card or that intriguing. I mean, you know, this is essentially a palace, you know, against essentially a structure built on ego that kept getting struck by lightning and burned down and rebuilt. I'm sure that somebody who is Chinese would have many more thoughts on this, but as a complete outsider, that's and limiting it to an attempt to assign it a meaning within a tarot deck, that's what I'm coming up with. So the next thing is the Hanged Man. So it was said in one of the, and here we're looking at it from behind, people aren't aware of that, out over Rio de Janeiro. But one of the videos I watched brought up the fact that some people think of his outstretched arms as a reference to his position on the cross, which of course would not be quite so easy as this is. But most people, I think, do see it just as his arms being open, because he is clearly very grounded here. I don't know what else what other, you know, are there any other monuments that they could have included here? I don't know. Certainly Christ as a hanged man on the cross, and this as a reference to that, is certainly valid. Even if the statue itself doesn't strike me in that regard, but rather as arms open and welcoming and accepting in that aspect of Christ. So what does it say here? The statue is about 38 meters tall and is one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. So, you know, it's not giving you any of the spiritual significance at all. And I think that there's nothing more that I could really add to that. This is another one that has gotten struck by lightning, they say at least 4 times. I think he lost a finger to one of those strikes, because again, it's up on a promontory, and it's, you know, it's way up there. So you could probably get some healing energy if you went up there, if you were not terribly grounded, because there is an electrical ground that happens in the ground that comes from something called earthing. My knowledge of that comes from something called earthing. So that's what I was thinking when I thought, oh, you could probably go up there and hang out, hug that statue, and it's probably got a nice background charge to it after accepting so much way of lightning. That might be good for one's health if you're as unhealthy as I am. So yes, but that's just me. There's nothing about that whatsoever in the videos. So next, let's see. So this is something I knew nothing about, and was really, it was interesting. So learning, this is the old Jewish cemetery, and I thought, well, that's such a vague name. Which Jewish cemetery? But it isn't a matter of which Jewish cemetery. It is the Jewish cemetery in Prague. So the Jewish community was marginalized in Prague, and restricted to a limited area, what they called the ghetto, the Jewish ghetto. And so at this particular synagogue, this cemetery, they tended to bury people on top of one another. So there are levels of burials here. And then each time they buried somebody on top of another person, they would try to bring up the stones with them, to put back on top. So what you have is just a graveyard crammed with gravestones that clearly there's not enough horizontal space for there to be people buried, and it's because they're buried vertically in the earth. There are like 12,000 stones, headstones, that are still visible, and they suspect there are many, many more underneath that. What else was I going to say? Oh, there was also this other weird, there's this Rabbi Lowy. So this is another death aspect to this. The Rabbi Lowy, very famous rabbi there, supposedly went into whatever sanctuary in the synagogue, whatever, went into their place of worship at night and met the angel of death writing names on what, I don't know if it's in a book or on a sheet or whatever, and the rabbi confronted him and, confronted death and tried to take that away to prevent him writing on any more names on there. And he looked at what was written, and it was his own name was written on there, and he passed away the next day. There is one of the synagogues here, or places of worship, also has the names of 77,000 people who died in the Holocaust. So there were, I think they said, like 150,000 Jewish people living in Prague at the time of the Nazi insanity, and there are only like 15,000 people today, so they have a wall or two that has 77,000 plus, more than that, names of those who were known to be lost in the Holocaust. So yeah, very appropriate death card. And the last one is the Ganges. So I had already learned a little bit about the Ganges just by looking into Varanasi. But even when I looked into Varanasi, I don't think I came up with the fact that it's a place where they do death ceremonies. So they take the body wrapped. I don't know if they wash the body and then they wrap it, or they wrap it and then they take it to the river. In any case, the deceased person is bathed in the river, is dunked in the river. All right, I could have this totally wrong. But anyway, they're taken to the river. I thought there was a dunking in the river or bathing in the river also, but I could be wrong about that. But then on the steps, because they have steps that go down to the water, a fire is created and the body is cremated right there on the steps. and that it is assumed that their their soul is kind of released to a better place. And I think it was that if you're the person who has died goes through this process, that they will no longer suffer reincarnation if they if their relations follow this particular ceremony. Anybody who is Hindu who knows better about these things, feel free to leave information in the comments. But that was more, that little bit there was more about Varanasi. And I don't even remember where in this Varanasi is. It's probably in the cups, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's in the fire. No. Yeah, it's the Eight of Cups. Varanasi is the Eight of Cups. And I had talked about it in another video. So back to the Ganges. So I watched this, which I think was a BBC two-part special on the Ganges, which was really interesting. And it, so first of all, another goddess. So this is another goddess. The river itself is supposed to be a goddess, but also, when it comes down out of the Himalayas, and there are 4 places that are indicated as being the sources, the primary sources of it. Tributaries coming directly out of the Himalayas. But there's also a story that she was, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's Ganga, was the water, she watered gardens of heaven. She watered the gardens of heaven. So part of the life-giving and sacred aspect is the way that this river creates fertility in the land, wherever, whatever land it goes through, it creates fertility and abundance. But she realized that she was needed on earth to cleanse the ashes of the dead. So that there was another purpose for her. She was needed down here, not just in heaven, but her gift. And this is, these are areas also subject to monsoons. So they know how powerful water is. But her gift was so powerful that Shiva had to cushion its blow when it came down to earth, and so it was kind of sifted through his hair, which divided it into the streams, which, so that's how we get, so it's almost like, though it's not said in videos, it's almost like the mountains are Shiva's hair or something, filtering that down. So it's all very interesting and very nature-based, and makes a lot of ecological sense. I mean, even the idea that she's watering the gardens of heaven, you get way, way up high, you have alpine meadows and stuff like that. And they showed some people went all the way up into these alpine meadows, but that are higher than the glaciers. Most people stop at a place where there's a glacier and water is coming out from underneath the glacier. And that glacial water is a milky white. And so I could see that being thought of again as like mother's milk sort of thing. I also saw somebody who I assume was speculating that there is something healing or bacterial about the water of the Ganges. I don't know. But I did see somebody speculating about that and saying that there was science behind it, but I have done no research. All right, so that's Temperance. So usually we have, there's a couple of different things. Usually we have her pouring from one pitcher into another. And so I could see this, though, being more of a star card in terms of watering one thing and another. So watering the gardens of heaven and watering the earth, but certainly you have the streams all coming together and converging to create the Ganges. So, it is a combination of a lot. So there is the alchemical aspect there. And of course, there is alchemy and transformation as it passes over the land. But anyway, to me, that makes perfect sense as the Ganges, to have that as one of the major arcana water cards. All right, so that's it. That's the next set of cards. In the next video, we'll cover Rene Le Chateau. I don't know, Rennes. I have no idea how that should be pronounced in French. Krakatoa in Indonesia. The Ziggurat of and the Alhambra in Spain. So those, I'm trying to do at least 4 a week, or 4 in a set, and it seems to be about 4 a week. But we'll see. Of those 4 I just mentioned, I suspect I won't be able to find very much on 3 of them. Probably the Alhambra, I'll hit pay dirt there, but the others I might have very limited information on. Yeah. So yeah, after that, I'll be done. In fact, who knows, maybe I'll finish the major arcana in my next video. Hard to say. All right, everybody. I hope you're finding this interesting. Yeah, so take care, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.